Good afternoon, everyone. This is Paige Kowalski. I am the Executive Vice President of the Data Quality Campaign. It was great for those of you, thank you, who chimed in for who you are. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work that we've done over the last decade around supporting effective data use at all levels. Primarily, in the early years around state longitudinal data systems. For those researchers on the phone, I'm sure you're familiar with those. But just a quick introduction and overview. We are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan policy and advocacy organization. We've been around since 2005. And our main focus is this big idea that you see basically when stakeholders in education have the right information at the right time, we believe that students excel. And we really think that folks on the phone particularly have a unique power. You're uniquely poised to empower folks in your state with information and really thinking about how are you using that power and are you making sure that those closest to students in particular have access to information. So I'm going to start where I always start, which is talking about why data is so important. Why does data matter? I think a lot of times we can get into these conversations really easily and get into the weeds because we get excited about tools and so many of the cool things that are finally coming online and coming to fruition after so long about talking about this. But I think it's important to start here because when we get caught up in tools and the technology, we forget that there's so many out there that haven't been a part of this conversation. And some of this can be daunting for them. It's in a language they don't understand. They may have privacy concerns. So I think it's always important to ground this conversation in why is this important, the work that you all are doing. And it's because everyone with a stake in education has questions. They need good information to answer. Whether they're a parent, they want to understand if their child is on track. Teachers that want to personalize their own instruction for students, school leaders, policymakers, those of you in state education agencies, I'm sure you get questions constantly from your chief looking at the most current data and trying to understand how to make the most of the resources that you have. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of states that we've seen over the years do such a great job with the data that they have in really getting that value out to folks on the ground at local levels that spend a lot of time, quite frankly, collecting all of this information. I think it's really important to focus on how do we get a service back to them. You likely at this point are familiar with the work that Georgia has done to deliver data from the state longitudinal data system into the hands of educators and parents. They have built the portal that seamlessly connects with the district portal, both for teachers and principals and also now for parents and sometime very soon in the future for students as well, so that they have that rich picture over time of their performance. And then just to stick with sort of the topic of the day around early warning systems, we've showcased the work in Massachusetts. We have a video on our website as well. The link is at the end of this presentation. The work that they did to mine their own data and really look at both, what are the indicators that we know across systems, across states, are these key indicators that we all have in common. But they took a look at their own data as well to try to find some patterns to create flags around and have gotten that out to their schools and been thoughtful about that release and their communication strategy as well. So those are two great states to look at as you think about how do we get this information out, how do we show value for all this work. I think we are missing a slide. And then at the same time, as we talk about this with stakeholders, again, what we found as we went out to talk about getting access to data or an early warning system or something that was really exciting to us, one of the questions we started to get more and more and more in the last couple of years is, what do you mean by student data? And this question stunned us at first, to be honest. We hadn't realized that for the most part, this data conversation, not only was it new, but it was, it's new to education, but it was very new to parents. And they just, for a whole host of reasons, just were not aware that data was being collected about their students and that it was sent somewhere or shared with someone. We also found while trying to answer those questions, those aren't easy questions to answer. Who has access to it and how is it used and what is it? So we embarked on a road of creating infographics and videos around these infographics to very simply help someone, particularly a parent, a lay person, just a member of the public that isn't steeped in all of the information that we all are, to understand what are we talking about here. And when they see it, then they get comfortable with it and they go, okay, I understand what you're talking about now, and I understand what's in it for me. And I think much like the information your doctor and your bank has about you, you wouldn't be comfortable with them having that if you didn't understand what it was, how they were using it, and also what service you were getting out of them having in the first place. To that end, we created another one. We call this the big vision, the big idea, to really get at all of this work that we're all doing. What is the point of it? And we wanted to make it very student-centered. So we talk about grace here in the middle. And again, this particular infographic has a corresponding video that gets at what is the value of Grace's information to these people who are in her life. And to really bring it home, particularly in light of the privacy conversations that I'm sure every one of you on this call is involved in your state, to really bring that conversation back to the student and to the people in their lives who need that information and who need tools to make sense of it. And then I think from there, once you're both sort of on the same page about what is that value for that student and how desperate we all are not to lose that value, you can start to have that bigger, broader conversation of what are the guardrails we place around that information so that we're not sharing it inappropriately and that it doesn't benefit the student at the end of the day. This is an infographic. Again, there's a video we just released a couple of weeks ago to try to get at that parent stakeholder that's on that vision infographic and really be able to show what it looks like when we are empowering parents with information. And we get at this idea that without information, there are a whole host of actions parents either can't take or are severely hampered in their ability to take those steps. And we do get to this concept of early warning. And I will tell folks all the time, I have an app on my phone that gives me instant access to my dog's veterinary records. I get email alerts saying I haven't logged in and checked something, and they sent me this lovely value proposition of why I would want to sign up for this service. The medical records travel with me if I go across state lines. I have them in an instant if there's an emergency. And I thought, I cannot believe I have this about my dog, and I don't have this about my own sons in elementary school. And wouldn't it be great if parents had that kind of instant access to their child's information and we were alerted in a timely manner before it's too late to intervene? A couple of absences in, we all know that that doesn't sound like a lot, but having the research behind us, we know that you are headed down a road of chronic absence and what that means. There are vignettes in here around sharing data, having control of that data, but also having that public data that helps parents really hone in on the best fit for their student in terms of programs and other schools. So that's a little bit about how we can use these tools to talk a little bit more and get on a common ground so we don't go out and say we built an early warning system and you make that assumption that everybody is on the same page as you. But I think it's important also to think about how do we talk to policymakers about how to make that data work for students. And while we've had a lot of luck with the infographics with policymakers, once they're kind of bought in, they want to know, well, what do we do now? How do we actually make this a reality? In April, we released a new roadmap for state policymakers with some recommendations that are grounded in these 4 policy priorities. To measure what matters, being clear about what students should achieve and having the data to ensure that if students are on track to succeed that. Making data use possible. One thing that we've heard, I'm sure you all have heard, when we go out and talk about data use, we get a lot of teachers and local folks that say, well, that's just not possible. You give them the vision of the early warning system, this idea of timely information at your fingertips, and what we hear all the time is that's impossible. So we've laid out some steps for states to take to make data use possible. Being transparent and earning trust, this one is so important. This is being very clear whether you're using infographics or any other means. I know a lot of these states now are out doing these SS stakeholder engagement sort of road shows. These are another way to do that, but to be really clear with folks, what are you collecting, how are you using it, how is it benefiting kids, and really working hard to earn their trust so you can demonstrate that you will be good stewards of their data. And then the hardest piece, really guaranteeing access, making sure those parents and students and teachers have access to all that good information so that it isn't just flowing up the system and being stored somewhere, that there's actually value coming back down to the folks who need that data the most to move those needles. So I'll switch a little and talk about privacy. We focused a lot on privacy in the last couple of years, as I'm sure all of you have. We don't see this as an extra add-on. We don't see it as something we can talk about for a few years, put a few laws in place, and walk away from. I think that one of the biggest things we've really wrapped our heads around and really thought through as we talk with states is this is a critical component of it. And yes, we do tend to talk about privacy in terms of compliance, but privacy is wrapped around, do people trust you? Do they feel good about what you're doing with their information? Have you overcome that icky feeling or that scary feeling? So it is much bigger than a law, a federal law, a state law, or even a practice. There's more that goes into that, and it's important to get to that piece as it is to pass laws. So there are a couple different ways that states can approach that. It's building the capacity and culture of responsibility and really being thoughtful about training your educators to use data well, to use it appropriately and ethically. There are fears, legitimate fears out there that people will use this data to hold kids back, to be a gatekeeper. There are those actual policies and practices that need to be put in place, whether it's reimagining FERPA at the federal level or it's thinking through new state laws in privacy and security, communicating constantly and demonstrating the value of this information, and being thoughtful about your data governance structures and who's a part of that. We have been taking a look at state legislative activity for the last 3 years. To date, every state in the union has introduced at least one bill except for Vermont. But every state on here, if you put all 3 years together, would be colored in. We have had almost 400 bills introduced in the last couple of years, and it has gotten less every year. And while the first year we saw a lot of bills out there that sought to really kind of prohibit some of the activities that states were doing, it has switched a little bit more to regulating the ed tech service providers and app builders and their ability to use student information that they collect. So my last slide is really just a few resources, some of those infographics, the stories we tell, the videos. I also added in here we have a couple of videos from Chicago and their on-track work. They're just great, no matter how passionate we all are about this work and the difference we know it can make for teachers and families. Sometimes we're not the best spokespeople, and we can tend to get a little too wonky and scientific in our talk about on track and indicators and research, and this is just a way to humanize it. We got students talking about why that on track system in Chicago is so great, teachers, parents, administrators, researchers themselves that can really tell it in a very different way than all of us here can. So I encourage you to take a look at those to just sort of set the foundation as you go out to have these conversations with folks. And with that, I am going to wrap up and turn it over to Susan Theriault.